How's it going? I am Joaquin JT Spratley. I'm going to be talking about the IBM HBCU Ambassador Program, which is connected with the White House HBCU initiative dealing with the underfunding and under-resourcing of historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Keep in mind, I am the IBM HBCU ambassador for Norfolk State University. I'm not a representative of IBM. I don't work for IBM. I am a student at Norfolk State University. There's going to be a lot of information here. I'm going to say a lot of things that's probably going to offend some people for unfortunate reasons. So if you get upset about anything, keep in mind that I do not represent IBM. I represent me, and you could argue, to a point, NSU. However, I am a student. I do not work for Norfolk State University. I do not work for IBM. I am a student, or IBM student ambassador for Norfolk State University in regards to the IBM cybersecurity initiative. Consider it an address to the IBM HBCU ambassadors. If you're watching this, then hopefully you learned something, but the intended audience is any individual who is or will in the near future become a student ambassador for this program in regard for their HBCU, to give a bit of a framework for why this program is important for HBCU culture, the HBCU community, Blacks, Native Black Americans, and that includes the American descendants of slaves, ADOS, the Foundational Black Americans, FBA, United Descendants of, United Daughters, United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. All of those sub communities, I won't say sub, but those smaller communities within the Black community. They're trying to, in their own way, work towards Black unity. This is important. I'm going to talk about why, and then I'll talk about the how, how to be a part of the solution for HBCU ambassadors and supporters. So jumping right off into the why, the reason we're here, like I said, the historic under-resourcing and underfunding of HBCUs from the government. Federally. That's what we're talking federally. You can also talk about private organizations, but there's a certain point where, people are going to argue, well, it's a private organization. They can do whatever they want, which is fair. But two things can be true at once. We can say that there's a big difference in how much support HBCUs are getting, particularly when compared to predominantly white institutions. And we can also say that private organizations, at the very least, do not have to be equal in the options they give. They're free to be elitist, or keeping it generic, to have favorites, to show any type of favoritism they want, because they're not bound by the same laws as the federal government, the state government, right? So I got these snippets in here, and the links will be below. And I highlighted the key points. Black institutions have to pay higher rates than white schools to borrow money. This also alludes to the Bank Black movement. Past couple of years, people have been talking about supporting Black banks. Why? Because historically, Blacks have had a harder time getting loans for getting a home or starting a business. Their access to capital. Right, so that's where the attention is going to the Black banks, such as One United, M&F Bank, the Carvers, Citizens Trust. There's two different ones by the similar name, but there's one like that, and that list goes on. There are quite a few of them, especially if you're on the East Coast. So that goes into why the Black banks are getting more attention now. Black institutions have to pay more. Why? Saying systemic racism. can mean a bunch of things to different people, depending on how comfortable you are with the conversation, how far you want to get away from it. You figure it out on your own, how you want to feel about that. Just 2 years ago, Maryland HBCUs sued the Maryland state government to prove that the state government had been restricting funds that they gave to the Maryland HBCUs in comparison to the state's majority white institutions. All right. This is stuff that's well documented. This isn't something that just happened. It's been going for on and on and on. Look at the snippet to the bottom left. Compared to the PWIs, predominantly white institutions, HBCUs have been underfunded by at least $12 billion over the past 30 years. And that's just the past 30 years. Going to the snippet on the bottom right, and we're talking about the years of discrimination and funding, whether that's funding from the state or private corporations. And again, you can say private corporations can do what they want because they're private. But once you start talking about federal government and state government, then you got to sound the alarm, because that means that things are very fishy. So when somebody talks about HBCUs are trash, dirty, poorly maintained, and outdated, make sure that is being kept in. The fact that historically HBCUs are not being given the money that, not just that they need, but not given money that's equal to what their predominantly white counterparts are getting. All right, we're not talking about equity here. We're talking about equality. All right, not equity, equality. Why would HBCUs be underfunded compared to predominantly white institutions across the country? Now, as I said before, this is for the IBM HBCU ambassadors to help understand why. I just basically explained how this IBM program, being part of the White House initiative, the Biden-Harris administration, this is supposed to be an effort to address, at the very least, the under-resourcing, right? By providing specific training and leadership development programs, assistance, and mentorship to HBCU students. Come out a little bit out of the HBCU culture, the HBCU community, HBCU history. Get past the Brown versus education. There's an obvious relationship between HBCUs and Blacks, Native Black Americans. This isn't new. All right, the HBCU stuff is nothing but another part of the systemic racism that Blacks have been dealing with since the beginning of the United States. All right. And people having to be extraordinary to bring attention to some of those issues and show that at the end of the day, this isn't about Blacks being lazy, not being capable of doing things. It's the programs and laws and policies put in place in a deliberate attempt to diminish Blacks' contributions and Blacks as a whole. Let's start off with the most violent one up here. The Deacons for Defense in the upper left corner. There's a great movie about this on YouTube that you can watch for free, by the way. The Deacons for Defense they were seen as a militant group. And in reality, they were simply a group of Black folks who wanted to defend their family in a city that was filled with not just white supremacy, but violent Ku Klux Klansmen. And they had to work a lot. They had to put their life on the line in order to bring federal attention to some things that the Ku Klux Klan was doing. Basically, Deacons for Defense was a great example of Blacks saying, we're going to defend our own, because we can't depend on the law to do it for us. So we have to defend our own. We have to force people's hand to do the right thing by any means necessary. And that just meant defending their families. Now, self-defense with firearms. Going to the right some, there's the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, which is a predominantly Black women battalion who were sent to Europe. Their entire job was to create a system and send out a backlog of the estimated about 17 million packages and other pieces of mail over the course of, I think, close to a year. That's a big deal. This is during World War II. I remember reading somewhere that whatever they did, within that system became the basis of the U.S. post office that we use today. Let's go down to the bottom left. These three elders, these are surviving victims. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. These aren't people who lived there and just old. These are individuals who were alive and witnessed firsthand the most commonly cited Black Wall Street massacre in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. These three elders, this is a new picture. This is a new picture taken from just, I think, a month or two ago, talking about, because they're fighting for reparations for that entire town being burned down. And the reason you're seeing them there isn't simply because they've been spearheading this case for years and years, but because a judge had a chance to bring the case to the court. And this white female judge said, no, we're not going to even hear this in court. We're not going to give you a chance to argue this in the court. And keep in mind, this is a well-documented event. And now you got people in that town talking about the goal should be reconciliation, which is basically a fancy word for just forgiveness and move on. I've talked about the reparations thing in a blog post with the history of reparations going to Japanese, Germany paying reparations to Jews, and how GI Bill to whites before blacks was a type of reparations, and how all of that kind of shows not a simply ignorance, but an intended disrespect and denial of reparations for what you could call the Black Holocaust, slavery against blacks in the U.S. They're still trying to fight that case, and they were denied. These are the surviving members from 1921. Going on, you got Martin Luther King Jr., who unfortunately showed that simply being nonviolent was not going to make much of a difference. Being united and just trying to do the right thing and saying, we're here, it didn't work. All right. We talk about the I have a dream speech, but we rarely hear, unless you look it up on your own, you don't hear anything about when he said, we're going to march DC, we're coming to get our check, reparations. You don't hear when he had that interview and he specifically said that his dream has since turned into a nightmare, segregation. No, I'm sorry, integration. Going from segregation to integration. Because that kind of gave room to expand this mirage of equality. We don't hear about those two things. And yes, I've talked about that in the blog post I'll share as well. And then you had Malcolm X. Somebody said, we need to be willing to defend, teach, and maintain our own. We got to be able to take care of our own. Ignore the religious beliefs. Listen to it. Don't just read it. Don't just read the book. Listen to things that came out of his own mouth. There's a bit of a controversy about how much in the biography of Malcolm X by Alex Haney was actually Malcolm X's own words. So find YouTube videos where he actually said things from reputable sources so you don't end up looking at deep fakes. Point is, many of that stuff goes into the old debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, focusing on skills versus having our own nation as blacks. That's just a nice little note to keep in mind to go with. And then a little bit more history. Fannie Lou, she went to this public hearing. She talked about the farce that is sharecropping and how she was treated. That's her in the lower right corner. And in the middle of her talking about sharecropping, President at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, decided to completely cut her off. She was able to speak, but the broadcasters went straight to the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, while he wanted to basically waste time to keep her from being heard, and talked about a 9-month anniversary of somebody who didn't matter nearly enough to be talked about at that time in that way at a 9-month anniversary. It was obvious to try to keep people ignorant to what was actually going on in sharecropping, the next type of slavery. It didn't work too much because later on the news companies picked up on it and showed it, but still. And then we go to today. On the right side, you see we got Ice Cube, well, as far as I know, the only black-owned sports league in the Big Three, 3-on-3 basketball. And then you have to the left of that, you see Dr. Cornel West. He's running for president. I don't know much about his talking points, even though I've read and I've listened to some of his stuff. But he's someone to pay attention to. Maybe he'll do something for blacks. We have to wait and see. And then at the top right, we see Yvette Carnell and the American Descendants of Slaves, ADOS movement community, the reparations group, reparationists. From what I've seen, they're spearheading the reparationist movement. So that was a lot, obviously. But the point here is that all of these individuals, they did their bit and influence others that came after them to be able to do more, understand, well, this person did this, so we need to understand this. Specifically, if you look at the MLK to Deacons for Defense to Black Panthers and Malcolm X, all of these things build on each other as far as history and understanding what does work and what doesn't work. Someone had to be first. Summarizing the why before we go into the how. This program, the IBM HBCU Ambassador Program, this IBM Cybersecurity Initiative, HBCUs, whatever you want to call it, this is specific to dealing with how HBCUs are systemically under-resourced. I'm not getting paid anything to do this, all right? But that's not the point. The point is to be able to help those, help my own now and those who will come after me, all right? If you need an example, you can just go back to the Maryland case from 2021 with the Maryland HBCUs, won the case against the Maryland state government. Specific to the ambassadors. Ambassadors need to lead, actively lead, be proactive in getting this information out there and note what you're doing. We don't know who benefits, so be ready to explain it to everyone. Be ready to market it in a way to people. Cybersecurity club, engineering students, web developers, software developers, marketing and accounting majors could benefit from the data science course. Entrepreneurs would benefit from the cloud computing courses. Just share this information with HBCU culture-centered platforms. More on that later. But the point is to be able to share this information and make it clear that this training can apply to everyone. Cybersecurity affects everyone. Data science affects everyone. Artificial intelligence affects everyone, whether you want to believe it or not. Cloud computing, cloud solutions affect everyone. Be ready to explain how these different types of training courses can relate to your audience at the time, and how having a digital credential can help them stand out above their peers and their competitors, their competition. Again, we don't know how this is going to help the future generations. We don't know how this is going to help HBCUs as a whole. What we do know is that we have an opportunity now, that we don't want to just throw it away. We want to make the most out of it. It's the very least we can do. If you accepted the opportunity to be an IBM HBCU ambassador for your HBCU, that is a big deal. And you should take it as a big deal. No matter how much people may downplay it and may treat it like it's just another thing to do, it is not. I'm helping you understand why. I just explained the why in a very short Black history and HBCU history lesson. We're making history. This is history, good or bad. There is no neutral. IBM HBCU ambassadors, HBCU students and alumni, and pro-Blacks. Once you've seen this, you have this information, you're part of the solution or part of the problem. You can't claim ignorance. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with having this information? Are you going to at the very least share it? Are you going to send this information to your alma mater? What are you going to do to be a part of the solution if you care? Now, when it comes to tracking, you can do a PowerPoint. I did this PowerPoint, and then it got to the point where I said, all right, I might have to do something else because I've done a lot that wouldn't fit in this type of presentation. right? But some type of document that shows what we're doing, what you're doing for your HBCU, how you're trying to get the information out there, and make sure it's accessible for the key stakeholders, the faculty member, their boss, etc., whatever professors that may also be looking and lend a hand. Have something tracking your efforts so that you can say, this is what I did to be a part of the solution. You can do it like a resume, have the STAR method, right? Situation, task, action, results and numbers, right? I created this post, I got this many views, this many clicks, stuff like that. We'll go into that. The point is to have something that you can build on to show your efforts for this. Performance evaluation speak for you. It's going to be a part of it. In some way, shape, or form, it can help you. It might land you your next job. It might land you an opportunity to have a position within some type of, group that's trying to further enhance the living conditions of your HBCU. I don't know. And you don't either. What I can tell you is that if you got this far enough in this video, then I want to make sure you know making the most out of this means you won't regret it later. You won't regret making the most out of this right now. And if you say you might have issues with time restraints, again, I'm going to give you the how. I'm going to give you a framework in just a couple minutes, and you can always reach out to me. You can just put a comment in this video or reach out to me anywhere else, and I'll help you any way I can. I'm pounding it home almost every slide. I know the HBCU community might not get another shot at this anytime soon, if at all. This is a big deal. Finally, if success isn't obvious, there are going to be people out there who take this as an excuse to say that this is why HBCUs shouldn't exist. They're going to ignore everything that I said about being underfunded. They're going to talk about alumni donations, even though alumni donations aren't supposed to have to pick up the slack for what should be equal, not equitable, but equal federal funding. Again, that's excluding the privately owned corporation. We're not talking about those. Talking about federal and state government. All right. It's going to affect future assistance from, federal programs and anybody else connected to it who may say, well, they didn't make the use of the last time we tried to help them. Why do it this time? Right? That argument is coming. Somebody's going to try to find a way to make that argument. This is another situation where blacks need to justify, deserving equality, in some way that it should already be happening legally by exceeding the standard. Right? I think probably every Native Black American has that some type of story of doing, exceeding the standard to get the minimal acknowledgement or a bit of respect, because you can no longer diminish the person. And this brings up the familiar example I mentioned a little bit earlier about the reparations for blacks being denied, trying to find ways to ignore the long history of drowned towns, lynchings, unjust incarceration, and the original 40 acres and a mule. There's a lot there. All right, moving past the why and going into the how. This is what I did. I went to all the IBM HBCU strategist meetings. There are at least 2 a month. Then I did the Zero Trust course in what is now called the Security Learning Academy. It might be ibm.com/training or something else by the time you see this. Mind the note on this lower left of this slide. But I did the course, so I got an understanding of how the course load looks, the content, the Credly digital credential website, how that works. I started mentioning the Zero Trust course and its content in school assignments, whether it was forum posts, written assignments, essays, some of which I put on my personal blog. I started sharing on what student orgs that might be interested, a cybersecurity club, a Linux user group, etc. And then I started creating content about the course to try to bring more attention to it, with the calls to action on the left side, the link to the Skills Build website, with a lot of the more introductory courses. All of the Skills Build courses have Credly badges. I'll link to the Zero Trust course. Sometimes I'll link to a resource hub that's for the NSU students, the Spartans, an idea that any HBCU can take and make the most out of. So I went from creating the videos and then started creating blog posts. I did, as of now, 3. The first one was about Army veterans taking the mindset of the promotion point worksheet. We basically wear our resume in certain uniforms between the ribbons and awards and the badges, and taking that mindset to doing these courses to get those credit badges and getting these third-party organization certifications like CISSP, Security Plus, PMP, Project Management Professional, et cetera, et cetera. The same concept. I did a long post titled, "What is an IBM HBCU Ambassador?" where I talked about all of this in more detail and talked about why it's important, how it's important, how to do those things. And I went in depth on it. So if you want to learn more in depth about this, you can read that. And then I did one for the NSU students about this, do these things, basically a call to action, quick checklist. Want to make the most out of your year, do these things. These are all ideas anybody from any HBCU could take and run with. But the idea was to do all of these things in an effort to create content that I can easily share in multiple areas, right? And just, create buzz on all these social media platforms. Some people don't like to read. Some people don't like to watch or listen. So I got written content. I got audio content, video content. So there's something for everyone everywhere. Got the YouTube shorts and I got the long blog posts and something for everyone in between that spectrum. These are ideas worth considering, again, for the IBM HBCU ambassadors. When creating content, particularly social media posts, use the term IBM HBCU ambassador in your school. That makes it easier for people to find you, especially when you're doing these things in HBCU social media groups and student groups, whether it's Twitter communities or private communication channels, email, etc. Which makes it easier for people to find that content when you're using those terms that people are going to think of when trying to get information about this program. Create infographics. That's a very easy way to share information. Quick brochure that can go on Instagram and Twitter, etc. It's a quick way to get the information out there. Doesn't require a lot of reading. It removes a lot of the issues of time management when everything you need to know is right there within less than about 50 words, a couple nice images. Could also do a live stream about courses on the Twitch, YouTube, OnCast, some of these newer platforms like Kick and I don't know the other ones, and I don't know how good they are. But talk about the courses and the relevant news. Now, the last 2 are more for the IBMers, the IBM strategists, the individuals who actually work at IBM and work on this program. Basically, to try to find a way to improve analytics and get feedback about the courses to better understand the funnel, how people are funneling into completing the courses or why they're not. The last 2 points are more for the IBMers than the ambassadors. For the student ambassadors to think about, maybe there's some other ways that you can come up with that may help your faculty advisor and your dean, depending on how involved they are. One last time, this is more summarizing a lot of the why in dealing with this program, talking about this program as an HBCU ambassador. There is an obvious political angle to this program. So these are the answers to the test. Skills Build in the Security Learning Academy, these training courses, they're open for everybody. Okay? They're open for everybody. They're not only for HBCU students. Anybody can do these courses. Anybody can do these courses. These courses are not just for HBCU students. I heard this complaint once, and we talked about this for about a minute or 2, a lot longer than we needed to. This is not an argument that deserves time. Skills Build training is for everybody. That's not what this is. Skills Build is not just for HBCU students. It's not just for HBCU alumni. It's not just for Black folks. The training is for everybody. The training is open for everyone. Okay? If you hear someone start complaining, well, why isn't everyone able to do it? Whatever, just say the training is for everybody. That's it. Okay? This program is about focusing on developing talent at HBCUs. And no, it's not racist. It's not extremist. It's not pro-segregation. It's not anti-white. It's not elitist. It is a focus. It allows for focused conversations specific to a certain demographic for a specific group. HBCUs, HBCU students, for the reasons I gave at the beginning of this video, because the issues that this program is meant to address are very specific to HBCUs. And this is coming from somebody who has gone to a predominantly white institution, Syracuse University. The complaints I hear about HBCUs, I don't recall ever hearing about Syracuse University. Ever. All right? The meetings are specific to, helping the HBCU students get that information to our peers in our campuses. But the training is for everyone. Okay? The purpose of this is it moves past simpler conversations and questions that we should already understand as a HBCU student, as a HBCU student ambassador. What is an HBCU? Why they exist? It's the same as when people are talking about issues in a specific city and a state. Change starts with you internally, just like cultural and societal changes start on a local level. That's the way it is. You got to start within your own. Instead of these broad, sweeping arguments, which won't do anything, because then there's no focus, right? The same thing can be said for breast cancer, cervical cancer, and prostate cancer. Different types of cancer. You may argue that there's a root fix for those, being a cancer, but there are still certain issues that are very specific to those types of cancer. Same thing goes with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, from military experience versus rape. Specific groups require specific focus sometimes. And this is one of those times. Going more into the why. If somebody says that, well, none of that changes anything, that it could be for all, well, how about this? There is a history of Blacks including others. And suddenly, Black-specific issues are put on the back burner or bleached out. What does that mean? It basically means that once there's a sweeping generalization, then other groups can get more prioritization. And you can look this up. There's plenty of proof online you can find. And Blacks get put on the back burner. Again, it talks systemic racism, historical racism, whatever you want to call it, whatever fancy term you want to call it. A history of anti-Black racism and anti-Black misandry. MLK, again, I talked about it when he talked about reparations and saying that his dream turned into a nightmare. What I didn't say is that he went from pro-Black to pro-minorities, and then within that civil rights movement, Blacks got the short end of the stick. So keep that in mind when we're talking about focus. Everything can't be inclusive. All right, just like your school team projects, when we're talking about parenthood, dealing with your children, everything can't be inclusive to everyone. These meetings and this HBCU work is not meant to be inclusive to all colleges. It's meant to be specific to the HBCUs. Focus on your HBCU. Don't argue with people who want to complain and say, well, everybody should get this. Everybody should be getting the same. There's a good chance that they're likely already getting this, something similar and more. Matter of fact, I can guarantee you they are. Don't argue with them, specifically if it's online. Don't argue with them. Just give them a link. Give them some links to this video. They won't watch it. It's going to be too long, I assume. You can share the link to this video with them. Share with them my blog post titled, "What is an IBM HBCU Ambassador?" If that doesn't work, then you can send them one of the links in the description, or you can just simply @ me, and I will get in there and I will be a part of it. We have to be on code for this. We have to be on code with this. We have to be on the same page in this. Don't just go back and forth. Could just be some white supremacist that doesn't want blacks to have anything. Somebody starts kicking and screaming, HBCUs shouldn't have any special treatment, which it isn't. This is somewhat equal to what these corporations involved in this White House initiative are giving predominantly white institutions already. Just give them a link, say we're done, and be done with it. Block them, ban them, whatever, or add me, and we'll see what's going on. Closing off with the calls to action for the IBM HBCU ambassadors. Talk with people about this program. Talk with people about Skills Build, about the training, about how it's free and how it can help you. Talk with the student orgs who might be interested. Any student organization that's related to cybersecurity, data science, accounting, marketing, cloud computing, the computer science departments, and entrepreneurs. Share this information with them. Share Skills Build with them at the very least. Help them understand the Credly digital credentials platform. Join the meetings. Add the HBCU strategist meetings to your calendar. It's 1 hour, twice a month, and we want you to participate. It's not meant to be a lecture. It's not meant to be a webinar. It's meant to be a conversation for sharing ideas, talking about things you've done to try to share the information. Okay? I recommend completing the Zero Trust course and at least one Skills Build course. Basic ones, or the introductory ones, are about 5 hours to start. They give you a good basic foundation if you choose to do the ones that go further in depth. But I recommend starting with Zero Trust so you understand how Security Learning Academy works and you get the Zero Trust. That's the flagship course right now. And do at least one Skills Build course to understand how Skills Build works. They're working on the user experience, the user-based design of these platforms to make them all easier to navigate. So it can help if you understand from personal experience how to navigate these platforms, especially while they're working to make these changes, make this easier for everyone. Create content. Create content. That can mean social media posts. It doesn't have to mean figuring out how to blog. You can go to find a newsletter for your school, ask them to talk about it. You can ask your school, if your school has a radio station, ask them to talk about it for a minute. Ask them to do a quick news report on it on their website, their blog section. But at the very least, put something, even if it's just in LinkedIn or Twitter communities. Talk about the courses, talk about this information, get the information out there. It gets you out there as well as a potential point of contact and subject matter expert in this relationship as a liaison, which can open up doors for you in regards to networking and further opportunities. Lastly, remember that IBM HBCU ambassadors and HBCU students who are serious about being a part of the solution, you're a part of HBCU history and Black history at this point. Again, good or bad, there is no neutral. If you know about it, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to share the information, or are you going to act like it doesn't matter? What are you going to do? That's for you to decide. Supporters, at the very least, share the video and the links in the description. At the very least. Okay? So again, I am Joaquin JT Spratley. I am the IBM HBCU ambassador for Norfolk State University Spartans. Behold. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave comments below. Hit me up on social media platforms. Spartans, you can hit me up in the private communication channels. If I'm not there and you think I should be there, let me know. I probably don't know about it, but I'm here to help. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. Feedback, constructive criticism. I want to hear it. If there's something that you think should have been mentioned, I know there's somebody's going to look at that one slide and go, why didn't you have Jackie Robinson or this individual, Barack Obama, this individual, this person? I'm not afraid to have those types of conversations, all right? Just let me know, put it in there, and let's have the conversation. We have the goal, unity, Black unity. Let's be a part of the solution. JT Spratt, out.